So now let's look at plant organs. So we have three different types of vegetative organs in plants. We have leaves, stems, and roots. So we're going to look at the differences between those. On this slide here is a monocot, okay? So you can definitely see those characteristics that we've talked about in this class. And so we're going to kind of go through and look at different plant organs within a monocot and a dicot. So first thing we're going to look at is roots. Okay, so the main thing that I want you to understand about the roots is how the anchor and the support of those roots are vital to the success of that plant. And those root systems, whether you're looking at a corn plant or a soybean plant, are extremely vital to that upright growth of those plants. They also are very important to absorb minerals and water from the soil that they are in. They also provide a lot of energy reserves, and those root systems can be a taproot or a fibrous root system. And I'm going to show you some different plants with those and just show you what those look like as well. So this is the cross section of a dicot versus a monocot plant. So you can definitely see some visual differences here. You can see that the cortex in the dicot root is a lot larger than a monocot root. You can see different, other different visual comparisons there. You can see the difference between the xylem and the phylum. In both of those, the xylem and phylum are obviously a little bit larger in the monocot and very, very small within the dicot. So what does that mean? That means that each of the different types of roots, the dicot root versus the monocot root, will have to learn to absorb. It will have to absorb water and minerals in different ways, and I'll show you some pictures of those as well. So these are pictures of the differences between a taproot and a fibrous root system. So you could look at this comparison to the right of your screen and see four different types of plants. You see a sugar beet, a wheat, a corn, and an alfalfa. But you can also see within those root or those plants the different types of root systems that they have. So the sugar beet and the alfalfa plant looks pretty similar compared to the wheat and the corn. Those two look similar as well. So taproot system, those taproots just have a large main root with very small lateral roots or micro roots that we can also call them. Fibrous root systems just have several roots, and each of those branches will then develop many different lateral roots. Okay, so kind of looks like a willow tree is what I would compare it to. Those different types of fibrous root systems. It looks like a willow tree within the ground, but a taproot system has that large main root within those small lateral roots, and that large main root will go as far down as possible. Now let's look at the rhizobia and the microzoa. So these are beneficial microorganisms that really are important in terms of how that plant is going to grow. So the rhizobia, that is the bacteria that will invade that plant root hair, the plant root hairs, whether it's a taproot system or a fibrous root system, and then it will form those nodules that will then fixate or fix that atmospheric nitrogen for that plant, which is really important when you look at how these plants are then utilized. And then the microzoa, those are fungi that will then grow from the cortex within that plant root or of that plant root and into the soil and then threads and absorbs that water from the nutrients. So both of these are very, very beneficial when you look at microorganisms or in terms of microorganisms, and a lot of science is done in how different varieties are then made to make sure that these two are enhanced within that science. stems. Very important when you look at the plant organs. Obviously, the visual thing that we see is providing that structure, but one thing that is vital and doesn't they stems don't get enough credit for the movement of different things like photosynthesis products, water, nutrients. Those are all very, very important to the structure of those stems, and can also conduct that photosynthesis and then store energy as well. These stems will include stolons, tubers, bulbs, corms, rhizomes, all of those different types of stems as well, and I'll show you some pictures of those. Here are different modified stems. So you can see from the previous slide what we just talked about there. We have tubers, we have corms, we have rhizomes, we have stolons, we have, or just not a modified stem or a bulb. So these are different types of stems that will then enhance that root system as well. So crown formers, when you're looking at the growth habit, have very deep tap roots, and they also really depend on that seed production for persistence, for energy, and for growth. Really, I mean, is the big thing. And then clone formers are parent plant replaced, and we'll talk about that in class. They're an asexual reproduction that happens within the rhizomes, the adventurous roots, or the stolons. So now let's compare the clone formers from the crown former. The white clover, obviously, it's going to have stems grow above the soil surface, and then alfalfa, you're going to see they're not going to have stems grow on a lateral basis from the ground. It's just going to grow up. So now let's look at leaves. So very important within the plant organs, because that's the main purpose or the main site of photosynthesis and transpiration. When you look at monocot leaves, it's going to have a sheath, a collar, and a blade. When you look at dicot leaves, it's going to have a blade and the petioles. The dicot leaves then can also be simple and or compound, and we'll look at some different variations of those in class. But this is really important because photosynthesis and transpiration of oxygen, of carbon dioxide, of all of those different very important aspects of plant growth is where that is going to take place. So making sure that those leaves have what they need is vital to the success of that plant. So here are different types of dicot leaves. You can see 5 different leaves there. We have from a simple to an even petiole, and how those will then grow. But remember that the whole purpose of these leaves is photosynthesis and transpiration.